everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am Anara Tabashaliva, along with co-host Dr. Victor Fett, Dr. Katerina Shrey, and our program producer, Professor Larry Sharey. We host a weekly discussion panel on Russia's war on Ukraine with guests from Ukraine, military experts, medical personnel, academics, artists, literary figures, and relief workers. Our panel is recorded and circulated nationally and internationally. We appreciate your comments and feedback. Special thanks to Marshall University Libraries and MUIT for making this weekly event possible. If you're joining us live on Teams, please feel free to use the chat to post any question for our guest. A quick greetings to our viewers in Ukraine from Dr. Katerina Shrey.
Вітаємо наших слухачів в Україні з глибоким поклоном. Ми далі свідки вашого страшного терпіння і також вашої великої сили. Дякую вам за вашу участь в нашій тижневій програмі.
Thank you, Katerina. Today's guest will be introduced by Dr. Victor Fett.
Thank you, Anara. We're honored to welcome back to this 199th meeting of Marshall University Discussion Group our contributor, Dr. Yuri Yarim-Agaev from New Jersey, USA, with his analysis of current events. Dr. Yarim-Agaev is the president of Transcom International, distinguished visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution. He has been a senior research fellow at Stanford, at MIT, and a visiting scientist in the Department of Chemistry at New York University. He is a scientist, economist, and above all, human rights activist. He was a key member of the famous Moscow Helsinki Group and the leader of the human rights movement in Russia, working closely with Andrei Sakharov and other dissidents. Yarim-Agaev founded the Center of Democracy in the U.S.S.R. and in 1984, this was to support dissidents in the U.S.S.R. and then worked with Vladimir Bukovsky and others to promote the peaceful dissolution of the Soviet Union into new independent states. Dr. Yarim-Agaev developed a comprehensive program to secure the free flow of information in Russia by invitation of the new Yeltsin's government in 1991. Welcome, Dr. Yarim-Agaev, with your analysis. The microphone is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Victor. Last time when we met, I expressed optimism about the war in Ukraine. I expected that by now it would be already have ended, and ended with Ukraine's victory. From today's vantage point, I still believe that Ukraine can win this war, that Russia can be defeated, and that Putin's regime will eventually fall. However, several developments, most notably changes in American policy, have worsened the situations more than I expected. From the very beginning, I argued that this war is not simply a regional conflict or a border dispute. It is a confrontation between two major blocs. On one hand, a totalitarian bloc led by Russia, but that also includes China, Iran, North Korea, and other totalitarian countries. On the other hand is Democratic Alliance, led by United States, including most European countries and other democratic countries in this world. This war is between two political civilizations. And this is an ideological war which started in 1917, the part of which is known to us as a Cold War between the Soviet communism and the free world, and which continues since without interruption. It didn't end in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The headquarters of this ideological war simply moved from Moscow to Beijing, but it still continues, and the goal of this war is by totalitarianism is to dismantle democracy and freedom in this world. And Ukraine's war is an important part of this war. It's actually a proxy war between totalitarianism and democracy. And the main strategic target is this war for Russia is never been Ukraine alone. The real target has always been the United States and the democratic world as such. Russia does not dare to confront America directly, so it chose Ukraine as a battlefield where this larger confrontation could take place. Was what encouraging in the early phase of the war that Putin fundamentally miscalculated the strengths and unity of both alliances of both sides. He overestimated the unity of totalitarian bloc and underestimated the unity and strength of democratic bloc. Well, he had some reason for that. Even in his first term, Donald Trump threatened NATO. He actually even mentioned possibility of America withdrawing from that organization. It seems that unity of NATO was already shaken. Biden's position before the war, before the Russian aggression of 2022, was also very weak. He even said that American attitude to this aggression would depend how big or small territory Russia would conquer. He immediately refused to provide open sky defense by American Air Force, and he immediately assured Putin that there would be no American boots on the ground of Ukraine, which was stupid and provocative for Putin, because even if Trump didn't plan to get engaged in this war fully, with American troops participating in it, there was absolutely no reason to declare it prematurely before the beginning of the war, which was only encouraging and provoking for Putin. Now, on the other side, Putin saw and expected strength on the side of totalitarian bloc, because he received all promises of support from his allies before the war, not long before it started. Russia and China made no agreement of no limit support to each other. Also, Russia secured support by Iran and other totalitarian countries, and it was sure that support will happen. But the situation changed, and it changed virtually immediately after the war started. And the reason for that change was that the main reason for that change was that Putin failed to conquer Ukraine as he planned. And he planned to conquer really all Ukraine, because his first target was Kyiv, with democratic Ukraine government, and which he planned to dismiss within a week, put his people in charge, and take control of the whole country. Now, this blitzkrieg failed, as we know. Russia was repelled. Kyiv was not conquered, and Russian forces were defeated and pushed out of Kyiv and Chernihiv, and that had very important political influence on both blocs. the Democratic bloc consolidated, and Zelensky enjoyed strong and visible support from the United States, Europe, and all other democracies. While the totalitarian bloc actually started to show signs of some disunity. We didn't see great enthusiasm by China for supporting Putin at that time. And the reason was that China, watching this, was clearly not pleased with Putin's failure, because such leaders in such countries don't like losers, as we know. And it temporarily distanced itself from the war. I mean, the only country which showed support, but not instantly, but first, was Iran, which provided drones to Ukraine. So at that moment, initial momentum, which was on Russian side, was its unexpected attack on Ukraine, on Kyiv, and actually conquering the very south of the country, changed to another momentum and trajectory change in the favor of Ukraine. Now, this momentum extended dramatically when Ukraine, in the fall of 2022, went further and not only released Kyiv and Chernihiv region as before, but liberated all Kharkiv region and started to go into Donbas region. So it was very successful Ukrainian counteroffensive, and it could have turned into Ukrainian victory and the end of this war, had Ukraine received and determined full and determined American support. And mind you, if you remember, it was not simply a successful Ukrainian offensive, but Russian army virtually ran, because it was completely unprepared. All Russian preparation and calculation assumed immediate victory and no resistance by Ukraine. And so when Ukraine in full force started to push Russia out, Russia was even not ready to resist it. It virtually ran. The problem was that the West didn't give Ukraine the needed support at that time. Support by American administration was lukewarm. President Biden hesitated for a very long time before delivering each new offensive weapon. His policy became infamous for, as somebody named it, a sequence of no, 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 yes. That's what happened virtually with every new weapons which America gave to Ukraine. And this pattern repeated again and again. It was first a very reluctant position to move from providing Ukraine of offensive, defensive weapons to giving it really offensive weapons which it needed for its counter offensive in the fall of 2022. The same happened with short and long range weapons, and again it was long hesitation by America, which also dictated pretty much policy to the whole Europe of not giving Russia long range missiles. It waited for a while with giving Russia Patriots. It waited even longer for giving Russia F-16, and also in very limited amount. So this policy that did not correspond to the real momentum and opportunity which occurred at the end of 2022. The crucial thing was the overall policy by Biden. He was never ready to commit himself to Ukrainian victory. And he never clearly accepted the idea of full Russian defeat. And that was under all his policy, and this hesitation proved fatal for further development of events on the battlefield. I'm a tennis fan, and I know what distinguishes a champion from a very good player. A champion is someone who can close the game. Many players can lead against a champion, sometimes for a long time, but they cannot make the final winning point. A champion can. Biden was not a champion in this sense. He was unwilling to bet on full Ukrainian victory, and therefore unwilling to help Ukraine close the game and defeat Russia decisively. And that gave Russia very important pause. Because, as I say, Russia originally didn't count on a real war. It's even called a special operation, but and it wasn't prepared. But the pause, which started in the fall of 2022 and continued into late spring of 2023, gave Russia a very important pause, which it used for two purposes. The first was to mobilize more troops. And really, for that period of time, Russia mobilized several hundred thousands more troops, which is more than all the army which started war in February of 2022. The second important thing was that it used this time to fortify its position, which were not fortified before because it didn't expect Ukraine's counteroffensive. But now they prepared with enlarged army in fortified position. They prepared for a real war with Ukraine. So by the summer of 2023, Russia had transformed its posture. It had mobilized hundreds of thousands additional troops. It built massive fortification. It had adapted to the battlefield. As a result, the Ukrainian counteroffensive of summer 2024, which was expected by all the world, failed to achieve its goals. Ukraine could not liberate significant additional territory. Mind you, I forgot one thing about full counteroffensive, which extended further. It was also liberation of Kherson, which was the only regional center occupied by Russia. So at the end of that winter counteroffensive of 2022, Russia was left without conquering any large regional center. Its main conquer, which was done with very hard way, was Mariupol, the largest city it managed to conquer before. But as I say, the summer offensive of 2023, to which Russia was already prepared, was a real failure on Ukraine's side. And as I say, the reason for that failure was the fortifications created by Russia, all its minefields, which all Western tanks couldn't overcome. But there was a second reason, which maybe was even more important. The Ukrainian counteroffensive was conducted largely according to traditional military doctrine, strongly advised by the Pentagon and European military commanders. But by that time, the nature of the war had fundamentally changed. This war had become a drone war. And this was not simply the addition of new weapons, it was a change of entire logic of warfare. Military strategy can be compared to a game of rock, paper, scissors. Scissors cut paper, paper cuts rock, and rocks breaks scissors. So similarly, all military strategy work the same way. Tanks attack missile launchers. Those tanks are bombed by aircraft, and aircraft are shot down by the same missiles which fly from those launchers. So each element counters another. Drones disrupted this entire logic. They did not just add another weapon to the game. They rewrote the rules of a game themselves. Western strategy were not ready for this transformation. Ironically, at the moment, at the beginning of this war, there were only two countries who produced drones in great amount. And it was not United States, it was not any European country, and it was not Russia or Ukraine. They were Turkey and Iran. And Turkey was the first country to supply Ukraine with its drones, and then Iran immediately followed, provided its Shahed drones to Russia. Actually, that was initial weapons, drone weapons in this war. But then each country rushed to develop its own drones, and today Ukraine and Russia are the major manufacturers of military drones of different kinds, which produce them in millions. I already mentioned that drones is more than additional weapon and change that entire strategy of the war. But it also fundamentally changes the economics of the war. Traditional air defense systems were designed to shoot down aircraft such as F-16, MiG-29s, or Su-36. These systems rely on land-to-air missiles. Some of them are extremely expensive, and some cost up to $200,000 per missile. This price was fully justified in the past. The aircraft they were meant to destroy cost many $million. Using one or even several expensive missiles to shoot down a jet made economic sense. But this logic collapses in a drone war. When the same missile is used to shoot down a drone that costs $2,000 or $3,000, or sometimes even less, the exchange becomes economically irrational. Paying $200,000 to destroy a $2,000 drone is not an efficient way to conduct prolonged war. This means that introduction of drones requires not only a revision of military strategy, but also a revision of military economics. Whoever fails to adapt economically will lose, even if they possess technically superior weapons. This is a crucial point to keep in mind when we evaluate both Ukraine's failure and resilience and Russia's long-term limitations. So initial underestimation of the role of drones damaged summer Ukrainian counteroffensive of 2023. But in the long term, it became very important for Ukraine and made it less dependent on American weapons. Now, the drone revolution became Ukraine's most important advantage was it went beyond Western aid and expensive Western weapons. It proves especially decisive at the sea. Ukraine sent flagships of Russian Black Sea Fleet, the Moscow, and many other vessels using naval drones. And eventually Russian fleet had to leave Crimea, which was its Sebastopol, there was its main port, and leave actually Crimea undefended from the sea and very vulnerable actually to Ukraine's counteroffensive. But as I say, the problem was that greatly expected Ukraine counteroffensive of 2023 didn't reach its result, and the events on battlefield changed the political momentum as well. So again, Russia started with its offensive, assuming strong support by its allies and undecisiveness by democratic bloc. Then Ukraine showed its strength, repelled Russia, and went for counteroffensive. And democratic bloc consolidated and gave its support to Ukraine, while a totalitarian bloc showed some cracks. And then, after Ukrainian summer counteroffensive of 2023 failed, the momentum reversed again. Totalitarian blocs started to unite and consolidate, while democratic bloc start to show weakness. Iran has supported Russia from the very beginning with its drones. Now North Korea joined it and sent directly its troops to fight on Russia's side. And China intensified its support by supplying Russia with critical electronics essential for missile and drones production. At the same time, cracks began to appear in democratic alliance. The most serious crack emerged with the election for the new term of Donald Trump and his confrontational approach toward Europe. At times, it appeared not merely that Trump weakened support for Ukraine, but that he leaned toward Russia. His talk of a peace deal closely echoed Russian demand for Ukraine capitulation without victory. Trump and situation started to look very dangerous for Ukraine. Russia was advancing slowly in the battlefield, while Ukraine was losing American support. However, Europe started to consolidate, and situation started to turn again. Despite Russian advances, they became slower and slower, and actually the situation is closer to a stalemate now at the battlefield. In addition to that, Russia's economy is deteriorating, and despite propaganda claims, Russia does not possess overwhelming superiority. Its political strategy relies heavily on convincing the West, especially Trump, that its victory is inevitable. It is not. Equally important, Ukraine has changed fundamentally. It now relies increasingly on its own military production, producing weapons, especially drones, at scale. Ukraine desperately needs financial support, but Europe appears capable and willing to provide it for at least for foreseeable future. Just recently, Europe approved a package of $90 billion, which would help Ukraine to sustain both its military operation and to help country to survive the next year. The American position, though, remains critical. Trump has repeatedly threatened to withdraw intelligence support, which would be a severe blow to Ukraine. And American political stance matters not only militarily, but symbolically and strategically. There is still hope that Trump may change the course. He does not operate in a vacuum, and ironically, Putin himself may push Trump in the right direction by insisting on total victory and rejecting any compromise. But the factor of Putin and Trump remain critical factors of this war. Both what each of them really wants and what is position of each of them, and relation between two of them, why they exist in this way, how they may develop, and I end with short analysis of the situation. I will start with Putin, and I will say that Putin's position can be read very clearly for all his presidency. There is nothing enigmatic about him and unpredictable. He is a KGB officer. And to explain Putin's behavior, in fact, it's enough to know that. He acts as a KGB officer trained in that organization, shaped by its worldview and faithfully following its internal rules and instincts. There is nothing fundamentally new or surprising in his presidential record. It's continuation of the same professional logic. The KGB was not a normal intelligence service. Its core mission was not national security in democratic sense. Its mission was to suppress freedom, destroy human rights, and prevent democracy. And that was Putin is doing, first inside the Soviet Union, and then wherever this influence is extended beyond Russia's borders. That's what he has done through his career. He fought democracy when it started to take roots in Georgia, and he immediately reacted to democratic developments in the Ukraine. But the most important thing is that Putin claimed that the main tragedy of the 20th century was collapse of the Soviet Empire, of the Soviet Union. He also said many times that the losing Cold War was a tragedy for Russia, and that America put it on its knees. And he sees his main mission, as he says it, to raise in Russia back to its dignity and its power and its political status of superpower and its dominance in a large part of the world, and actually revenge for defeat in the Cold War and restoring the Soviet Union and maybe even the whole Soviet Empire as it was before the Cold War. And that is his real intention, what he calls a root cause for that war. So that is very important because that where it deals directly with the policy of Donald Trump, who doesn't want to understand it and who readily accepts it. Now let's turn to Trump. and try to explain his position, because it really needs some explanation. Because whatever he declares his desire to end the war with Ukraine, whenever he starts to push Russia, one phone call from Putin changes the situation, and Putin again and again, Trump again and again takes Putin's position, virtually accepting all his demands and pushing Ukraine to capitulate to Russia. Why is he doing that? When discussing Donald Trump's behavior toward Putin, one frequently hears both from Ukrainians and Russia in both emigre circle and Ukraine the claim that Trump was simply a KGB agent recruited long ago and therefore dependent on Putin and acting on his instructions. There have been publications to this effect, including statements attributed to a former head of Kazakhstan KGB who claimed that Trump was recruited in 1970 and allegedly given the code name Krasnov. The claim may be true or it may be not true. But even if it were true, it doesn't automatically that follow today's actions of KGB agent. First of all, I cannot accept it until I have absolute proof. I am a dissident. And for dissident accusing someone of working for the KGB was the most serious accusation possible, and we would never accept it against any of our friends unless we have absolutely strong proof of that. KGB used that extensively, trying to split us, spreading the rumors that that or another person is the agent, and which we categorically dismissed and which helped us to survive. So from that point on, I dismiss that accusation unless I have real proof. There are two other reasons. There was Mueller investigation, which actually pretty much tried to find out whether it's true or not, and it failed to bring any proofs. But there is more important point. Actually, Trump's position was pretty much supported, if not followed, from a large circle of his MAGA supporters, which are counted by hundreds of thousands, if not millions. Now, I cannot assume that all those people were also recruited by KGB and are KGB agents. So the problem is more political than conspiratorial, I would say. And there is another explanation why Trump became in this way. And my explanation of Donald Trump's behavior is much simpler. I believe, and I believe more convincing. It's combination of ignorance in foreign policy and an enormous ego. Together, those two traits explain most of his action. Trump's central problem is not bad will, but it's ignorance. He doesn't understand totalitarian regime. He doesn't understand totalitarian blocs. His second presidency began with threats against Denmark and Canada, while China and Russia remained largely unchallenged. He cannot tell friends from enemies. And that is the fundamental thing in the foreign policy, which he is definitely not strong at all. Trump was entirely formed within American business world, which has its own internal logic and rules of behavior. That world operates and assumes some common denominator in business, which is profit. Two corporations may compete, but they ultimately share same language, money, markets, and they can compromise sharing, dividing their profits. And that's where Trump's idea of making deals come from. But foreign policy is fundamentally different. It doesn't operate according to the rules of American business world. Totalitarian states and democratic states have nothing in common. There is no shared denominators. There are no common interests between the United States and Russia. And I always challenge to name at least one, and so far hasn't heard of any. Russia doesn't care the human lives as America does, and it's proved directly in the war of Ukraine, where Putin lost already more than 1 million people and doesn't care to lose as many as is necessary. So totalitarian democratic countries are not comparable entities, and what is most important and what Trump completely misunderstands, the totalitarian countries are ruled by the ideology, not by individuals. And here is his main mistake. He thinks that he can, by somehow making friends and have good relations with Putin or Xi Jinping, he can resolve the problems with this country. But he cannot, because they are servants of their ideologies. And the ideology cannot be either befriended or charmed. And that's a main miscalculation by Trump. Now, the second part, as I mentioned, is Trump's enormous ego, bordering with actually mania grandiosa. No, and we saw just most recent example yesterday that he renamed Kennedy Center into Trump Kennedy Center, which we are not already surprised, which becomes kind of typical behavior for him. He really believes that he is the greatest president of the United States. He even challenged George Washington and Abraham Lincoln because they haven't made as many peace deals as he did. And so far, there is the only figure he has not openly challenged or eclipsed. It's Ronald Reagan, and that's very important in this context. For several decades, the Republican Party was in essence the party of Ronald Reagan. Reagan was its gold standard. His greatest achievements it was an achievement of Republican Party in America as a whole, was winning the Cold War against the Soviet communism and presiding and assuring, let's say, collapse of the Soviet Empire. And that is exactly what Vladimir Putin considers the central historical injustice, and that what he tries to correct, and that at war in Ukraine is a crucial step in this direction. So Putin's goals is revenge. Putin's goals is a defeat of revenge for defeat of Soviet communism in the Cold War. His policies, internal and external, are directed to reversing that outcome. He presents himself as the man who restores Russia power and who will restore the whole Soviet Union. And Ukraine is absolutely central point to this project. Ukraine was the crown jewel of the Soviet Empire. Without Ukraine, there can be no real restoration of that empire. Now, we must ask the critical question, what would it mean if Trump helped Putin with this war? If Trump were to force Ukraine into capitulation, handing Putin a victory, what Russia cannot easily achieve, because cannot achieve at all on the battlefield, it would represent a decisive step toward reversing the outcome of the Cold War. It would mean undoing the defeat of Soviet communism. It would mean erasing the greatest achievement of American foreign policy. It would mean destroying the legacy of Ronald Reagan. Whether Trump understands this consciously or whether it operates on subconscious level remains an open question. But the alignment is unmistakable. Helping Putin win the Ukrainian war would simply be not only betrayal of Ukraine, it would be a historic defeat for the United States and symbolic burial of the Reagan's legacy. And whether Trump understands it or not, he wishes to erase that legacy. But the stakes could not be clearer. Thank you. I finish with that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yarim-Agaev, for the brilliant and comprehensive talk. We have already a question from Dr. Deutsch. Please, Len.
Yuri, you mentioned the $90 billion commitment from Europe. Where is that money needed most? To pay the Ukrainian soldiers? Is it needed to purchase more military equipment? And would that be more drones from Turkey? Would it be more drones from the United States? More drones created in Ukraine? Please talk about where that money needs to go.
Well, this money is needed, first of all, to support Ukraine's economy and life of ordinary Ukrainian people, because Ukraine doesn't have enough money to do that. So if country cannot survive, most population cannot survive, it cannot win the war or sustain this war. So that's first priority which Ukraine has. It definitely needs money to pay its soldiers as to all other people. As to drones, that the least what America it needs more technology than money. Actually, Ukraine doesn't need to buy drones anymore from either Turkey or the United States. Actually, Ukraine started to sell drones, and it offered to sell drones to the United States, which has much less drones than Ukraine. So in terms not only drones, but in terms of production of missiles of different kind, Ukraine is now in very good shape. It managed to create a very powerful military economy. And let's not forget that Ukraine was one of the most developed parts of the Soviet Union, including in military sense. Actually, the main factory, a military plant, which produced missiles and most modern military equipment, was Yuzhmash, and it still is in Dnipropetrovsk, or Dnieper now. It was the main Soviet military plant for producing missiles. But Ukraine has already also many, it has Antonov, famous Antonov airplane plant, which produced heavyweight airplanes, and so it has serious experience in plane production. It has Konstantinovka, which is still not conquered by Russia. It's still part of Donbass, which is under Ukraine's control. Is a center of glass and optics, including military optics, fiber optics, and everything else. And America and Ukraine has a great deal of best university and polytechnic institutes of the Soviet Union, which prepared many scientists and engineers of high level. So that is a force of Ukraine, which actually the West never appreciated and estimated. It over considered that all those technological achievement and people and scientists and engineers and plants are concentrated in Russia only. But it's false. And Ukraine now proves very well that it's capable of, it's just recently developed new long-range missile, which maybe can compete with American Tomahawk. And I always told that giving Tomahawk to Ukraine is more important from political than military standpoint, because it would mean some commitment by Trump for supporting Ukraine, and unfortunately it didn't happen yet. But as I say, the best where America succeeds, it's now is military production and development of new and very sophisticated weapons. And also we have to give due to other part of Ukraine's economy, and first of all, agriculture. Despite all these war efforts, Ukraine produces enough food not only to feed its own country, but actually, as we know, to export some grain. It sounds like virtually a miracle, after all this bombardment and missiles, etc. But Ukraine does very well in this respect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yefim, please.
Oh,
Yefim Somin.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Yarim-Agaev. I should know that my son has been your occasional partner at Radio Liberty Zhigalkin program.
Yeah.
My question is this. What about the following angle that maybe, at least in case of Putin, more so than in case of Xi Jinping or certainly Iran, that ideology may be somewhat dispensable, considering how presumably radically, the communist ideology in which KGB was reared was replaced by, what might be called, in fact, yes, a Nazi ideology. And sort of, it is more a tool for the ruling junta, essentially to be in power and maintain this totalitarian regime. What do you think about this kind of angle, maybe?
Yeah, I can answer your question. Actually, I have an article which gives analysis of all the situation, which was published only in Russian. I should translate it in English for other people, which actually explained that Russia became Nazi country and fully totalitarian country. And actually, I explained the dynamic of change of political regimes in Russia from the moment of Putin's coming to power. It's actually started as a KGB junta first couple of years. Putin was only one of them, but it was a return of KGB to the power. But gradually, Putin consolidated his personal power, and it became authoritarian regime led by Putin. But then next transformation happened, and it happened with the annexation of Crimea. By that moment, actually, Putin's personal power started to weaken, but annexation of Crimea, which was actually a byproduct for Putin, it was not so important. His goal was to stop and suppress Ukraine's democratic revolution, and that's why he went for Crimea. But to his maybe surprise, it caused incredible euphoria in Russia, as you know, Kremnash, etc. And Putin realized at that moment that consolidate his power further and maybe even save his power, he needs now to rely more on ideology. And he chose mainly Nazi ideology at that moment as a foundation for his new power. And from that moment on, Russia turned from authoritarian to, again, totalitarian country. But it's very interesting totalitarian country because communism didn't disappear either. And as we know, Communist Party always remained in Russia. But also, when Putin came back to power, he started to restore many communist things, and such as symbols and anthem, and he started to praise Stalin, also kind of presenting him not as a communist leader, but as something else. But we know who Stalin actually was. So eventually, we have totalitarian ideology, but which is hybrid ideology of communism and Nazism, which is very possible. It's not so surprising because those ideologies are very close. And Putin showed that they can well coexist. But in whatever is this combination, the main thing to us is that it is totalitarian country, and in totalitarian country, ideologies start to rule over anybody, including Putin. And Putin is to great extent now subordinate to that ideology. And because that ideology is the only thing now which somehow explains and approves this war in Ukraine. So Putin cannot retreat from this ideology. It's his base now at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Yefim. I'm sure we have time for a couple of more questions. We're here almost an hour. Anara, please.
Thank you very much for your excellent analysis. It was very interesting, especially those who grew up in Soviet Union. I just found many interesting moments. My question is why Russian opposition is highly fragmented? What divides and shapes Putin's opponents and their Moscow-centered camps and versus ethno-regional pockets or groups, and what is your advice to the current Putin's opponents in Russia and beyond Russia?
Well,
it's a little bit practical question.
I'm quite skeptical and critical of what is called Russian opposition, particularly abroad. I know some of those people. They are very different from dissidents as we were. Actually, a big part of those people were part of Russian administration or politics, and they failed to do anything while they had strong position in the government. Then only because and after some of them were dismissed or even in prison, like Khodorkovsky, they started to oppose this government. They didn't oppose it before by their conviction. You know, it was kind of reaction to their dismissal. And it was very weak opposition because they called themselves a loyal opposition, which to me is a kind of oxymoron. You know, I don't understand what does it mean, loyal opposition, particularly to such a person as Putin and his government. I cannot understand any loyalty to how can you be real strong opposition still keeping some loyalty to that government. And so those people failed many times. I don't think that most of them have any chance to have any influence in Russia. And also they don't have as clear moral position as we had. You know, they never challenged the main problem of Russian society, which we did under communism, which I believe is a moral degradation and restore the basic moral principles. And we challenged it, we spoke on it, and actually this moral degradation became even worse, you know, for years of Putin. Look, at least when Afghan war started, there was the group which was called Soldiers' Mothers, which were fighting for bringing back their sons and husbands, you know. While now we see many mothers and wives who actually send their sons and husbands to the war, hoping to get some money if and when they are killed, you know. I mean, that's the level of moral degradation of society is incredible. And economic and political problem is not enough unless and until you challenge this main problem in the society. The problem is that to challenge it and to lead it, you need to have moral authority. And the dissidents did have that moral authorities. We could have led the society had we got the chance to doing that. That new opposition in its majority doesn't have such moral authority. They didn't gain it by such a struggle as we did. I don't want to talk about all people, and I hope that more people will emerge inside Russia in this struggle, and this struggle will eventually form some new opposition and who would be able to lead the country in right directions. But unfortunately, I don't see it now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna, for asking. And this is what many of us were asking in recent days, observing what is going on in the U.S., in Europe. Thank you, Dr. Yarim-Agaev. This was, again, very comprehensive and very, very important for us as we are nearing the 4 years of this war, which probably future historians will qualify, if not as Third World War, but definitely as very broad war involving practically the entire world by now in any way, hybrid or not, doesn't matter. Thank you once again, and I will ask
Thank you
Dr.
very much, and I want to wish you happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year.
Thank you. I will ask Dr. Shrey to say a few words to our Ukrainian viewers, please.
Дорогі браття і сестри в Україні, ми зберігаємо вас у наших щоденних думках і молитвах. Нехай милосердний Бог тримає вас у своїй опіці. До наступного тижня. Прощаємося.
Слава Україні!
Героям
Слава
слава!
Україні!